Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today Enna Reittort is back, and we are going to talk about word magic. And the English language actually is very useful to show that. And yeah, Enna, welcome back. Good to see you. How are you?
Happy to be back. Happy to start the new year, as they call it, this thing they call 2024. Happy to start with productive conversation.
So some people say our language is actually not just our language, not just English, German, or whatever, but that language in general is rooted in myth and in symbolism and in magic, because that is where it started, extracting symbols, giving it a meaning. Can you follow that line of thought, or do you think it's and not that we have not spoken before, but you know, the written word?
Yeah, I mean, it's not wrong to ascribe that kind of elements of origin to language, but I think it goes way, way deeper than that. Beyond the intellectual.
Okay.
The fact that different creatures, animals and human animals, we just make sounds that happen to, they're made through the vocal cords in whatever form they happen to be. Cats have a particular language of purring that is still largely a mystery to the scientists. And I mean, okay, it seems to be a normal thing for a great number of creatures, including, certain insects, to make sounds that we can hear. And it's quite probable that a lot of the insects that we don't hear also have their own way of making sounds or some kind of vibratory signal. So it seems to go hand in hand with the fact of being living beings. And I even sometimes get a sense that there is a sound thing even in trees. I'm not talking about the wind and the leaves, okay, that's way out there. So making sounds that go with the state of being in which the creature finds itself. The cat purrs when she's really happy. And, we'll make nice sounds. When I talk to my cats, I don't speak English or any language like that. I just go, or, I'm going to make my equivalent of cat sounds, and, they find it reasonably plausible for them. And so they respond and we have whole conversations. So, it's normal. Communication is normal, and language, in whatever form the language happens to be, is one of those forms of communication. And then, okay, humans over time and over geography developed all sorts of uses for language. But the most primordial use for language is communication. And perhaps we can keep, I've got my woo understanding of language, which is also validated for me in my communication with, with beings of nature around me, and in contemplative practice, communicating, beyond physical beings. So, but perhaps we can go there later. So the origin of language, I think, is perfectly natural. There's nothing, particularly, it's extraordinary in itself, but it is natural for living beings. You see, and your cat agrees with what I'm saying. Perfectly natural for living beings to make sounds. And these sounds convey a meaning. So it can be a relatively primitive meaning, I mean, we humans would say that the animals have a primitive way of communicating, but in fact, when you get to know a particular animal pretty well, you realize that there are all sorts of modulations for different sort of emotional states of the animal, or different ways of calling an adult, calling a male, calling a female, calling a little one. It's pretty sophisticated, for the animals too. So, yeah. What I think is particularly fascinating is the idea of certain ethno-linguists, to the effect that initially we started with monosyllabic language, words made of just one syllable. And I find this particularly true with Thai and Laotian, where these languages are a mix of monosyllables, which are their own, and Sanskrit words that have many syllables and that convey concepts, whereas the monosyllables are more directly rooted with life, less with, the explorations of the mind. And with monosyllables, you're not going to have that many possible combinations of sounds. So they have the tone system, which for us Westerners is, a sentence like my, which for us is just MAI, can mean is the new wooden house burning. New wooden house burning and question mark are all denoted by MAI. And, I used to work a silk project here, and silk is my, but then they started building my wooden house, which is, wood is my. But I was so used to speaking about my silk that when I started, having conversations with the builders about what kind of my they were going to put in, I didn't say my, I said my. And they would look at me with, their eyes more round than my glasses, thinking she's crazy. It took me a while, of course, to realize that I was putting my emphasis. I was also using the Westerners' way of adding emphasis to the importance of certain words. And so my, that really felt important for me too, like we want the right wood, kind of thing. And okay, once I got that straight, okay, I'm going to say my all the time. So, and even opposites, pclae and clae. One means near and the other one means far. So if you don't get the tone right, somebody may be sending you, to the house next door or to, 5 kilometers down the road. So, this business of having monosyllables is very compact. It's a very elegant solution for societies that are compact, that are collectively, well attuned to each other. And there's no word magic there. It's just the language reflects life. I think playing around with words and making magic with words, especially, the nefarious magic, comes when language becomes more complicated and it's made to correspond with, sorcery or, rituals to get the gods to do stuff for you. I mean, that's just speculation on my part, but. And then there's the word magic, which has to do with meaningless syllables, which are used in, Bij mantra, the primordial seeds. They're called seed mantras, which are just one syllable or several monosyllables strung together, which don't really have a normal life human meaning, but they express something in the subtle dimensions. And so, whatever string of bij mantras you have to express correctly to get Shiva to do something for you, you have to make sure that you're going to pronounce that one correctly at the right time, the right pitch, and the etc. So, word magic is pretty natural for humans, not quite as primordially natural to humans as basic human language, like what I'm referring to, with monosyllables in tone language cultures.
Have you ever heard of the Book of Jubilee?
The Book of
Jubilee.
Of Jubilee. No. Tell me more.
It is not in the Bible. It is one of those books that the Council of Nicaea.
Okay.
We don't need that. Well, in that book, it says that the animals became mum. Yeah. Not really mum,
Yeah.
as we know they have their own language, but they were able to talk like humans, but they lost their ability after the fall of man. Does that make any sense to you?
You know what? That reminds me of the idea of a Russian paleo anthropologist who states that animals are descended from humans. It's not the Darwinian direction that, we started off as apes, or even earlier, like that we started off as monocellular organisms and gradually we became more complex. It's the other way around, according to him. And his argumentation is pretty convincing. And so, for him, animals are degraded forms of humans who decided that in this or that ecosystem niche, it was a good idea to, be able to live up in the trees. And so they developed an extra thumb on their feet. And they developed a tail for better balance. And they can still hold themselves upright, but not for a long time. They cannot comfortably walk on two legs. They're much more comfortable going on all four. So there are many examples of different creatures that he gives. And so, what he says kind of aligns with what you're referring to from the Book of Jubilee, because if it's the fall of man, okay, I mean, a degrading human who becomes a dweller in trees will also lose the capacity to use the human language, because, it's a different kind of language that's going to go with living in the trees. So that makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, there's lots of stuff that's written in these ancient texts. Is that that's not a Gnostic text, is it? The Book of Jubilees?
I don't think so. I think it is part of what they call the
Apocrypha, yeah.
Apocrypha.
But the Gnostic stuff is also Apocrypha. I mean, Apocrypha is basically all the scriptures, all the writings that, as you say, the Nicaea Council decided was not, canonical, not orthodox, and, out you go. So, but that's, that thing from the Book of Jubilees seems to make sense in the direction of what this Russian guy says. And
okay, that's
and he's
interesting.
beginning to have, quite a following too.
Okay, I have to look him up.
His name is Belyayev.
Okay. the thing that irritated me was that let's say, for argument's sake, this is true, and humanity was punished by their god, and then the animals were punished as well because they lost the ability to talk. May I ask what the animals have to do with anything here? Why are they being punished? I mean,
I think the bit of punishment is that's just the mentality of the time.
Okay.
I don't think that's, I mean, whatever it is, I don't think there's anything involving punishment. That's an extra mental construct that has been instilled in human minds by the phenomenon of religion. Like, you behave and you believe in this particular god, and you say what that priest tells you, otherwise you're going to be punished. Yeah, but no, I mean, this idea that humans would have degraded, that's assuming that the human is superior to the rest. Okay, so that's another preconceived idea. But basically, if I find myself in a very yummy tropical forest where there are lots of trees with yummy fruits up there on the branches, and I don't have all sorts of modern tools to go and pick those fruit, like high up, it's going to make sense for me to climb up in the tree. And I remember when I was living in India, there are people who have a talent for climbing up trees, in particular coconut trees, because somehow their feet are capable of gripping the trunk of the tree. They'll just go boop, 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 like a monkey.
I've seen it many times in Sri Lanka.
Okay, right. Yeah. So it makes sense. And if, over time, that particular guy who climbs up the tree like a monkey figures, well, it's nice to be up here. And, perhaps I don't need to bother with all the people downstairs. And, there's lots of coconut trees out here. Perhaps, and if he's already got the feet that have that subtlety, that subtleness, that flexibility, and that grip, well, he might be tempted to further improve his limbs to be able to jump from one tree to the next. It makes sense. And, my only problem is when somebody says that that's a degrading human. It's a human who's made a choice to live in a particular niche and to adapt to that particular niche for the best sort of symbiotic relationship. And, if humans have done the same thing to become whales and antelopes and things like that, well, kudos. I think that's rather wonderful, because like that, degrading humans, in inverted commas, will have contributed to the diversification of the fauna on this earth. So, if one turns these arguments the other way around to look at what would be the advantage of doing this, and then we don't need anybody to give us punishment. We are liberated from having to consider ourselves to be the top of the food chain and to be, the masters of the earth and all this kind of thing. It puts everything back in a much more kind of natural perspective where there's all sorts of things that can be explored.
You are probably familiar with the science of cymatics. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So for the audience, that is, you have vibration, you have on a plate, let's say you have sand, you play a certain sound, and you will find that the sand takes on a particular pattern that is unique to that sound. So meaning vibration actually does create reality. It creates this the sound creates a structure. In that light, how would you interpret the Bible verse, in the beginning was the sound, or the word, but word is sound. You know what I mean? And the
Yeah,
word
sure.
was
But word, yeah, okay.
and the word was with God.
Well,
So if we switch that and say beginning was sound instead of word, would that make more sense?
I'm going to be pedantic and take us back
Okay.
to Greek.
Yeah.
The word is logos, but basically logos, the meaning word, which actually in the Romance languages, it's not in the beginning was the word, it's in the beginning was the verb. And so, you know, verb as compared to word is an active element. Okay,
Yeah.
it's generative. It's kind of it's creative, much more than, you know, a word which we would take to be perhaps a substantive. Furthermore, logos is more a structuring, an organizing principle. And so an organizing principle can be taken to be organizing different sounds, like a vowel, a consonant, another vowel, another consonant, to produce a word. So logos does also mean word, but that meaning is derived from the first meaning as kind of like an organizing principle. So a word is an assemblage of individual sounds that has to be congruent with the vibration, the existential vibration of whatever the thing, the animal, or whatever it is that that word is supposed to correspond to. So this brings me back again to these languages that are essentially monosyllabic. A word is a monosyllable. So you're going to have, you know, a maximum of 3, 4, 5 sounds for that one word. That one word is going to have, because it's got fewer sounds, it's going to have a greater chance of being congruent with the essence, the vibratory essence of the thing that it is going to be denoting. The more syllables you have, the more you're going to get away from prime reality and you're going to go into the conceptual, as has happened, especially with Western culture, starting even in the Middle Ages with the theologians, where, you know, more and more things were mind games, going away from natural reality. Whereas, you know, peasant conversation would be more simple from you know, the theologian's point of view, but it would be much closer to actual reality. And with that kind of language, the peasant would also have a more intimate communication with the animals, the plants, the soil, you know, all the elements of nature, and would have a keener sense for the subtle realms all around and how the subtle realms respond to sounds and to, well, even to human language of that nature. But nature is not going to respond to a philosopher's discourse. Nature is going to respond to, you know, the basic sounds that we can put out. So yeah, perhaps I'm going around in circles, but this is it the question of, you know, the vibratory truthfulness of words having to be congruent with the vibratory nature of the thing is, to my mind, very, very important. I think that's absolutely, you know, essential. And when I encounter a word that makes me feel I just read a word like when they're talking of the word, they're talking of simulation all the time now. They're trying to, convince us that we're living in a simulation. Now, the word simulation itself makes me feel creepy inside.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, there are many, many other words that are used in today's English in particular that make you feel, if you have a sensitivity to this kind of thing, it's going to make you feel, cringe. Like the word God also cringe. So, then it's interesting to follow one's own physical cringe and to try and feel into where that cringe, what is it exactly? Which combination of sounds in the word simulation or the word, I don't know, or build back better, those things. What is it in those sounds and the way they combine together that makes me feel uneasy? Because I'm also thereby going to understand why they are using those particular combinations of words that look good on the surface. But when you start feeling into how the physicality of their vibration feels to you, you're immediately going to know that there's nefarious word magic involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a matter, it's a matter of our natural word magic that most of us have lost, but that we can, with that kind of attention to the way vibration is a bridge between the physical and the subtle, the deep reality of who we are and how we connect to the outside world and to the way in which nefarious word magic is being thrown at us. This, becomes a very fascinating game.
Yeah. What I found interesting, the Cambridge University did a study and they found out that as long as you put the first letter and the last letter, as long as that is correct, the rest of the word, the rest of the letters, you can scramble them up as you wish. People will still be able to read it. Because we do not read words letter by letter, we see it as, as a whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but this has to do with the way we are made literate.
Mm-hmm.
I take you back to my example with my in my. There's no way that, that my builders were going to reconstitute unless they knew the kind of problem that a foreigner has with tones, which for them is completely natural. There's no way that they could make up for my mistake to put it back the way it should be. So a lot of it has to do with, I think, with the way, literacy is given to us and the way we have learned to read quickly. And most people do not, who read, even people who read slowly, they miss, they miss a lot of the visual information. They're going to skip, they're going to take just enough for their mind to reconstitute something. And, I'm aware of this because as a writer who is a fastidious pain in the neck for myself, editor and re-editor and re-editor, I can just look at, I look at a word even sideways and I feel that there's a letter that's not in the right place or that shouldn't be there. So, there is, I've got this developed instinct, even in my visual field. And I'm amazed to discover that most other people don't have it. So, yeah. But, what you're referring to is a fact that I think has to do with the fact that people have been removed from a proper culture of their own language by education, by, sound bites, by, I don't know, the 8 o'clock news, the delivery of information, too much of it in sort of with buzzwords, plus what people have lost a huge amount of the vocabulary in their own language. So, there are many, many factors that go to explain the phenomenon that you're referring to. On the other hand, for people who are well educated and who read a lot, that ability is very, very convenient because it spares you, the tedium of having to do it letter by letter. But it's not even just letter by letter. Most people read word by word. If they're reading carefully, they're going to read word by word. And, this is a problem with translators. They translate word by word, and what comes out the other language is complete bullshit. Because it's the whole meaning of the whole phrase or the whole sentence. It's the whole thing that is a totality. And so, if we are well educated and we've learned to read well, we can read quickly and we can take in the meaning of a whole, at least phrase, let's say 5 to 6 or maximum 10 words, or of a whole sentence, let's say of 2 lines. We can take in the meaning, without having to go into, being analytical about each word. So, yeah, that, the study it's correct, but it's like most studies, it doesn't go into the real complex roots of why this thing is.
Yeah. But I saw 2 lines written like that on a website, and in the first second I thought, what is this? Why are they writing research so weirdly? And then the sentence itself explained, okay, this is what they found out. So the first letter, the last letter was all in the right position, and the rest was just
right.
But yeah, so I experienced myself that I could still understand what it was.
Yeah, well, that's because of, largely it's because of education, and it's because of, well, yeah, I presume that, the kind of sentences they were working with were not terribly sort of scientific vocabulary.
No. This
Because
was just
that's another form of word magic, scientific language. Okay, I mean, every profession develops its own word magic. If that's normal, the carpenters are going to have their own word magic, their tools, the techniques, all of that, which the lawyer won't understand. And lawyer, God knows whether they've got their own word magic. And science.
And the priesthood.
Oh, they're all priesthoods anyway. But
Okay,
the carpenter.
Okay, I know what you mean, but I mean
right?
the official priesthood.
Oh, of course, yes. And I mean, it starts with the way they've messed around with the scriptures to make them more, I don't know, spiritual or more frightening or more inspired, whatever it is that they wanted to achieve with the scriptures. But the way they, yes, the way they mess around with words and yeah, and they take these very, bread and wine they denote bread and wine. But then you bring in that extremely complex word of transubstantiation. And that complicated word, which belongs to the priests and not to you, that word is going to change that normal bread and normal wine into the things that we're going to be cannibalizing. So, I mean, yeah, okay. But then, science, the language of science is sometimes, I try to force myself to read, something that somebody has posted, especially in the medical sciences. And sometimes I really have trouble making even superficially logical sense because I don't really understand where the verb is. I don't really understand whether what seems to be a verb is actually a verb. And yeah, no. And then, but the word magic of that thing, the nefariousness of it is made manifest, I think, in the names that they give to their new drugs.
Mm-hmm.
When that thing remdesivir came out,
Mm-hmm.
the first time I saw that word, I froze. I could just see the bloody, hideous, horrible demon hiding inside that word. I mean, just the way they put together those names, names of drugs 50 years ago were not so frightening. They were alien, but they were not all that frightening. But this, I mean, remdesivir and, the other ones that they've come up with, and you can just feel those horrible, greasy, greedy claws sort of going into your flesh when you see a word like that. And that's the power of the vibration in those words. There again, I mean, I am very sure that they do not invent those names out of the blue. They're not done at random. They're not done at random. If you are attuned to, the vibration in words, a word like that is going to make your skin creep.
Yeah. So now the English language, some people say it's a hybrid between German and French. Yeah, be that as it may. But we know that German has actually its roots in the runes. You can still see, if you are able to decipher runes, Germanic runes, that some people also use for fortune telling.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a direct link between our language today and something that people used for magic.
Yeah, but let's understand once again that the runes correspond to particular sounds. It's always the sound that comes first, okay? But the essence of the runes is to be a visualization that seeks to be as close as possible to the actual nature of the vibration in the sound. And that has been, of course, largely lost in, the things that became our modern alphabets. And runes, it's funny because it seems to be a thing of the North. It's in the Germanic languages, okay, the Scandinavian, Slavic languages also have their own runes. It's funny how it seems to go with the North. I have not yet explored that fully, but I have to. Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, in terms of what makes up the English language, yeah, I mean, the really vernacular English words are of the Germanic family, but then there's a hell of a lot that they got, half of it is through French, it's from the Latin Roman family. And so they're, which means that they have a hell of a lot more words because they're going to have both the Latin version and the Germanic version for exactly the same word. Which, in the old days when the English people were terribly well educated and they had learned Greek and Latin and this, that, and the other, they wrote very complex prose and they could write very beautiful poems. But now that English has become the global language, it's been leveled down to the smallest common denominator for everybody. And, there are not that many English speakers who speak beautiful English, let alone good English.
That is true. And when it comes to, and here we go, when it comes to spelling, not every native English speaker knows how to spell anymore.
Well, you have to, you have to admit that the way English is written is just It's so far from the way it sounds. But I can say the same thing for French, and I can say the same thing for Thai. There are lots of languages where there's a huge distance between what is written and what is actually spoken. Whereas German is much more coherent in terms of, both the spoken and the written. I mean, you guys are much more consistent.
Yeah, that's true. German is one of the most precise languages. Usually you will always find a word that nails it on the head, And yeah, but unfortunately, also German has been largely bastardized. But yes, when I look at works from Goethe, Schiller, wow. It's not really good German for singing. Yeah, for that, it's not really useful, I find.
Well, I don't
But
know. I mean, some of Schubert's Lieder, the words, the lyrics are pretty, pretty okay.
let's put it that way. It's not really suitable for modern music.
Oh no. Well, I don't know. I mean, I remember a heavy metal group, German, and they had this song, mttaer. Wow. And it was, these guys, these sort of, big metal guys sort of going, mttaer. Yeah, it was, yeah. I don't remember the name. I don't remember the whatever, but it really struck me. I think, many languages are suitable for post-pop music, for heavy metal, for rap, for all these things. These postmodern forms of music that are so they're so anti-system. They are so anarchistic. Actually, they can take the language and mess around with it in a way that actually works. So, this goes hand in hand with, we are in a period of decadence. Okay. So that's just the way it is. But
yeah. I brought that up with the runes because first of all, you have the direct link. And then from there, it is no longer that wild to assume that there are building blocks in our language that, yeah, contribute to our control and to control our spirit. Like a blueprint.
Oh, yeah. And in that sense, in the beginning was the word, would be like a blueprint kind of thing. No, having lived with, peasant people, so they're sort of simpler, more direct in their use of language, more direct in their way of inhabiting their language, but also having studied, Greek and Latin, and having been educated in different languages, more and more, while, of course, I lament the fact that most people in their ignorance nowadays are governed by word magic that they do not even know is there. But that is the reverse side of the coin, whereby our words are a direct tool for us to really speak, from our soul, profound being, to each other and to the creatures of nature. But of course, that takes a particular sensitivity to the language, not just in terms of intellectual meaning, but rather much more in terms of the energy of different sounds and how they work together. In terms of, combinations of what we call vowels and consonants. The consonants being the wide open space, and the vowels and the consonants are like they're the frontiers, between the beginning and the end of an ah, so that we can go into an e afterwards, but we need to have somebody in, something in between. And so there is this, really fascinating sense of the succession of sounds in the language, like being the river of these vowels, this open space, this open flow, which has to be steered into specific directions by the consonants. And when you start, working with the feeling of that, then I like to imagine that it would not necessarily be so hard for us to invent a new language that would be more correctly ours than the perverted languages that we already have. Anyway, I'm just going off track, okay? But language and word magic is such such a huge domain, and it touches so deeply the heart of who we are. And
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and the power, my sense of how we learned to use language creatively was that we had to give names to things and creatures as they appeared, in our reality, way back when. But in those days, we had that sensitivity, that subtle vibrational sensitivity to the nature, the essence of, whatever this tree was, whatever this strawberry was. And there was something in us that came up with the right succession of consonants and vowels that would respond to the nature of that thing. And thus, we could have a communication with that thing without having to, go and study all sorts of books to find out how a strawberry is made and what it likes to eat. But just with that direct communication, where the vibration of what came out of our mouths or our thoughts in word form would reach that thing or that creature in such a way as it would talk back to us with its own vibration without necessarily vocalizing it. If it's strawberry, well, I don't know, perhaps strawberries have their language and we used to feel that vibration way back when. But as it is now, okay, it's easier to get the vibration from a cat than from a strawberry. So, looking at language from that perspective, the actual magic of language belongs with us. And the perverted word magic that is now governing a majority of humans it's a simulation. It's a perversion. It's a distortion of the actual reality of what language should be.
Yeah. I have one example. Here in Germany, our government likes to talk about special assets that they will provide for certain projects. Special asset is nothing else but debt.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
When the government talks about that, it means they are going to make more debt. But that is, of course, a way to pull the wool over the eyes, yeah, because the government doesn't have a treasure somewhere hidden in the wardrobe or whatever, yeah. And so, or what we call reproductive health.
Oh, yes. Oh, that one. Oh,
oh my.
Yeah, no, all the big United Nations buzzwords, all those things. Oh, yes, quite. But I mean, the thing is, Judith, the Western world did not have the experience of the Soviet Union where people knew how to read between the lines. They knew that, special assets meant debt, except that the Soviet Union did not have that much by way of debt. It was a largely non-monetary economy. But people, learned how to read between the lines. And that is an art that the West has not acquired because, we believed that we had democracy and that, our governments had all the best intentions, for the countries and for the people and for everything. And so, we're so bloody naive, so naive in the West.
Yeah.
And we blamed it all. We blamed it. We knew that they were doing propaganda in Soviet Union, but it was there. The shit was happening there and it wasn't happening to us. So we didn't need to be careful about what was happening to us. It's so much easier when the shit is happening elsewhere than, no, I'm fine.
Yeah. And if you fall asleep in a somewhat open and free society, you wake up in a dictatorship every time, every single time. And I can tell you that the eastern part of Germany, those federal states that were reunited with the rest of Germany in '89, up to this day, those people have a fine radar for when things are developing into the direction of dictatorship. They are far more sensitive to that than the Western Germans. Here, I live in the western part of Germany, but my goodness, the Kool-Aid has done its work, really. People are no longer able to read between the lines, and
they never were. In the Western part, they never were.
Yeah.
I mean, during the Third Reich, did they learn? Don't think so. I mean, a few did and probably fled, but otherwise, no.
Yeah. This was the public hour. For full access of the entire interview, please join our Patreon community. Thank you.